Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 62nd lecture of the ASC webinar series. It is my privilege to introduce Professor Arjun Rao. He is an assistant professor in the Department of History and Archaeology of Central University of Karnataka, Kalburgi. He pursued his PhD from Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune. He is a field archaeologist specializing in prehistoric archaeology, early historic archaeology, and computational archaeology. His research projects are regionally focused in the states of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and Chhattisgarh in India. The focus of the talk surrounds the Iron Age and Megalithic culture in the Coorg Plateau in the Western Ghats. Before we commence this interesting discussion, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the professor for sharing his expertise with us through this talk. Sir, could you please begin with your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I hope that you can see my slide now.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Arjun, and I will be discussing and making some attempts to show a very quite interesting tropical region, which has studied with megalithic sites around 1200 to 300 BC, probably the first millennium BCE. 3,000 years ago, seems to be quite conducive kind of socio-cultural development to enter into the tropical regions or tropical forest like the Western Ghats. And out of that, particularly, the focus is on the Coorg Plateau. The Coorg Plateau is, for your general information, you must have probably heard about the places like Madikeri, or the upper reaches of the river Kaveri, which is in the western part of southwestern part of the Karnataka state. Coming to this topic, this Iron Age or megalithic culture studies in India has been very popularly studied, and I think Iron Age research is one of the most well-researched area of archaeological investigations. However, considering the very broad region of the Iron Age or megalithic site distribution across the Indian subcontinent, it has brought in certain regional challenges or regional diversities to understand various aspects of this Iron Age. Much of the focus of understanding Iron Age is centered in the Gangetic Valley. So when we talk about Iron Age in the Gangetic Valley, we compare ourselves with the quite interesting part of what is termed as the second urbanization. So right from the second urbanization, or you classify them into the early or middle or late Iron Age, associating with the contemporary socio-political development, starting from the concepts like Janapada, Mahajanapada, out to the period of Mauryas and Ashoka. I mean, that has been a very popular perspective and popular approach to understand the Iron Age culture. However, Iron Age culture, by its definition, is the introductory phase of iron. The iron that was introduced probably now there are different dates that is going back to second millennium, third millennium, even third millennium BCE. However, we are talking about that part of Iron Age where the iron technology, not only the technology, not only the production part of it, rather the iron becoming a social product, or the iron becoming a socially inclusive materials for economic as well as various domestic operative or functional purpose. So iron, introduction of iron is again a very big area of research, and the use of this material culture is becoming quite interesting, probably during the first millennium BC. So we are talking about the Iron Age. A general date or the chronological framework that we have for the Indian subcontinent or South Asian Iron Age is 1200 to 300 BCE. However, when we try to understand the megalithic culture or the megaliths in proper, the megaliths are predated to 1200 BCE, and also the megalithic practices or the tradition, it also continues beyond 300 BC. That means even during the early historic period. And megalithic practices are still a kind of ethnic practices or living traditions in some parts of the Indian subcontinent. So we are talking about a quite interesting mortuary practice or the megalithic traditions that has spread across the Indian subcontinent. Coming to understanding the landscape archaeology is one of the core area to understand the megalithic sites, because the by the first millennium BCE, especially beyond the Gangetic plains in the other parts of the Indian subcontinent, the early agriculture and domestication process had established Neolithic settlements. These Neolithic settlements to the Iron Age, though shows a continuity or transition, but one thing becomes very particularly clear, that the geography or the kind of a perspective that the prehistoric population developed at this stage is becoming highly clear because of the establishment of sedentary villages. So therefore, the sedentary villages or the village settlements is also a kind of a continuity into the Iron Age. The difference is the lithic or the stone using traditions conclude, and it continues with the introduction of iron, or inculcating the iron objects in various kind of functionalities. On the other hand, when it comes to the mortuary practices, the Neolithic mortuary practices, especially in the case of the urn burials or urn traditions that the Neolithic populations had developed, especially in the southern Neolithic or in South India, we can see some kind of continuation in the mortuary practices entering into the megalithic phase. This also exemplifies in some of the Neolithic sites. There were probably some attempts to develop a kind of megalithic structure, though very quite rudimentary in the form of capstone during the late Neolithic, especially in the southern Neolithic conditions. So therefore, Iron Age cultures are broadly regional and they are very diverse. There are different, Indian subcontinent, the different parts of the Indian subcontinent has its own development of Iron Age cultures. However, when it comes to the southern India, it's not just Iron Age sites or Iron Age culture, but very largely represented high density of megalithic sites after the Vidarbha region. So what are the sources that we have to understand this Iron Age culture or megalithic tradition? This is a very crucial stage. The first millennium BC has both archaeological sources as well as the literary sources. On the archaeological sources, the habitation sites or the settlements themselves can quite interesting or significant area of research. And many of the Iron Age sites are largely represented by the megaliths, for the fact that the megalithic burials consist of grave goods which are of iron products. On the other hand, when we talk about the habitation and megalithic sites for southern India, there is always a differentiation in quantifying habitation sites versus the megalithic sites. Putting in simple words, the large number of megalithic sites and a very few representation of habitation sites had also given a perspective that to understand what kind of social factors that might have represented by the megalithic communities. The various theories, some of the theories questioned they were nomadic groups. Some of the theories questioned about the land-nam process. The land-nam process in the sense that the habitations were there, but the site formation process or the deposition of habitation materials were poorly represented, and therefore they were lost during the different cycles of forest covers. So that land-nam process is also quite interesting theory to understand. However, now we are getting more systematic evidences to understand the group of megalithic sites represented by smaller or larger kind of habitation sites. The other kind of sources are the objects itself. Since it is an Iron Age, the iron itself becomes a very crucial source, and this source is very much studied in terms of typology, in terms of pure archaeological, social science aspects, and also it is also studied through various way of doing physics and chemical studies or metallurgy in simple words. So therefore, iron objects, associated ceramics like black and red ware, red slipware, black slipware. So there are a lot of these kind of associated materials, cultural materials for the identification of habitation and megalithic sites. And as I said, this is nothing but a continuation of early agricultural and pastoral development. During the Iron Age phase, the pastoralism as well as especially the crop cultivation or agriculture becomes much more intensive and developed in such a way that probably the large scale cultivation was becoming prosperous, and eventually the crops started to become part of the grain goods. Particularly two quite important crops were the paddy and the finger millet. The finger millet are locally called as the ragi because they are very oftenly found in the megalithic burials being deposited. On the literary sources especially, which can fit into understanding the Indo-Gangetic region of Iron Age sites, there are texts, Buddhist texts, other various texts that gives us indicative of the use of iron, the production of iron as well, and down up to the period of the Mauryas and the later period. For example, the Kautilya's Arthashastra also talks about the iron mines, iron ores, and the revenue that is generated from the iron. So the text also quite supporting to understand. However, the text has certain limitations and it represents particular geographical extent. On the other hand, in the southern India, the Sangam literature also gives certain inputs to understand the megalithic communities or the communities who were into the practice of similar kind of tradition that represent the megalithic practices, and also the references to the iron as well. Apart from this, much of the burial potteries, especially the black and red ware potteries from the burials or from the megaliths, they usually found with graffiti. And the graffiti is largely conjectural, but we can try to understand the typological differences and the distribution of particular graffiti forms across the landscapes or across the sites. Well, the three broad classification, early Iron Age, middle Iron Age, and late Iron Age can be, very spatio-temporally it can be analyzed, but it also indicates certain kind of iron smelting developments that took place in terms of technological aspects as well as with the topological aspects. Iron smelting technology, starting from the wrought iron technology to the process of steeling and carburization process, tempering process, lamination process, and quenching process that occurred in a very fast development right during the early first millennium BC. And by the end of the first millennium BC, the wood steel comes into the picture. However, this also represents with some kind of the changes in the sophistication of iron objects, beginning with simple arrowheads or spearheads or points, knives or blades or axes, the flat axes. Then later on, developing this technology for the making of plowshares, daggers, blades, the javelin and lances. And by the end of the first millennium BC, the much more weapon grade kind of iron objects. So all these different evolving iron technology and evolving iron objects also have certain socio-political developments that touch into these lines. Now, coming to the southern Indian part or the the particular region or the particular geographical condition that we are talking, this may not be directly implicated, but we can try to understand that the iron objects that were found in burials can also have certain kind of socio-cultural as well as economic networking that could have taken place, especially in the conditions like tropical forest conditions. So therefore, there are quite regionally differentiation that we have to try to understand and investigate. Quite simple. What are megaliths? Megaliths are nothing but huge stones that are erected over the burials. This is quite, as I told you, it is very well researched and it is quite commonly known what is the meaning of megaliths and the distribution of different types of megaliths. By and large, the megaliths can be broadly classified into sepulchral types and non-sepulchral types. Whether it is sepulchral or non-sepulchral types, much of the megalithic burials that were excavated so far or that we know today are secondary burials. They are not primary burials unless some of the, in the extreme rarest of the rare case, some pit burials or megaliths with the pit burials have given us a primary context. Otherwise, megalithic burials, megaliths are largely secondary burials. There are different types: cairn circles, pit burials, pit burials with menhirs or stone circles, cairn burials, urn burials, sarcophagus, dolmenite cyst, menhir, stone alignments, dolmen with porthole, dolmen of different dimensions, hood stone, umbrella stone. So quite number of different types of megaliths were constructed or erected, and it also indicates that to a certain extent, this has also led to a kind of a theory that promoted social hierarchical approaches. However, different types of burials found in different pockets or different regions of megalithic regions in South India, which clearly indicates that the first millennium BC was quite interesting because there were different types of megalithic practices that were happening among the various social groups belonging to the Iron Age phase or Iron Age culture invariably. Well, this is the most, no, the kind of which triggered the megalithic burial excavations. The excavations that were conducted in Brahmagiri by Sir Mortimer Wheeler in 1947. This was, I think, this made the subject very popular in the Indian archaeological studies. This represents a typical cyst burial of a Brahmagiri type. It is called a Brahmagiri type because the rubble walls or rubble walls that are surrounding around the cyst or around that slabs, the 4 slabs that you see, which looks like a coffin, which is buried deep into the earth with a hole on the one of the slab. I mean, these rubble walls are quite interestingly called as the Brahmagiri types because in other cases, similar kind of burials were also excavated. However, this rubble wall surrounding the cyst is quite unique to Brahmagiri. I mean to say that 1947 excavations at Brahmagiri, located in Karnataka, made a lot of kind of popularity to study more and more or to excavate more and more megalithic sites associated with habitations or so on. And especially in Karnataka, apart from the Brahmagiri types, there is another site called Hirebenkal, which is located in the central part of Karnataka, which is quite closer to Brahmagiri as well. And that is called the Hirebenkal. The Hirebenkal sites are also quite popular in understanding the South Indian megalithic sites. So these are all dolmens. These are on a hilltop. Across the hilltop, about hundreds and thousands of these kind of dolmens were constructed. They were erected. However, they are largely secondary in nature, so there is no depositional possibilities to study. So the third category of sites that are largely known in Karnataka is the alignment or stone alignments. Stone alignments can be broadly understood in 2 ways. Those alignments which indicate a kind of series of commemorative stones, maybe by using the naturally available boulders, and they were aligned in a particular line or in a particular geometrical way. And the other one is the possible indication of the menhirs acting as star constellation or which can astronomically show some significance. So these are the quite 3 popularly known perspectives on megaliths in South India. Coming from the Iron Age sites and the megaliths, what was their occupation? I mean, what was their agricultural approaches? Their crop cultivation included the cultivation of paddy, ragi finger millet, wheat, kodo millet, barley, hyacinth gram, horse gram, black gram, green gram, common pea, and even there are some indications of the appearance of cotton. Cotton seeds were also represented in the late Neolithic phase. For example, a site called Vatgal in Karnataka. So many of these crops is a continuation of crops from the Neolithic levels, except rice probably. The late Neolithic or the paddy could have been the exclusive crop of the Iron Age. And that also brings in new perspectives because much of the crops are summer crops, the dry crops, and paddy represents the winter crop or kind of a wet cultivation. So therefore, these are the crop shoots that are majorly represented through the agricultural communities of this culture from southern Indian sites. Coming to the paddy, paddy seems to be most important as well as an introductory kind of a crop exclusively during the Iron Age. And they are highly domesticated crops, which is Oryza sativa. And this paddy becomes part of the megalithic practices or the burial practices because many of the times, most of the times, the burials with the paddy or in a paddy husk is retrieved in a pot, and that especially the pots like globular red slipper pottery. These kind of pots were quite preferred, and also the three-legged jars. So they were found with full of paddy being buried along with the megaliths. So I think the paddy has something, the rise of the paddy has something to do with that close affinity with the mortuary tradition itself. And next to that is the ragi cultivation. Coming to the domestication of animals, wide varieties of animals are domesticated, especially that also brings in a continuation of the Neolithic pastoralism or the domesticated animals like sheep, goat, cattle, water buffalo, and also dependence of dietary practices on wild animals by hunting and gathering, which indicates that the sense or the perspective or the strategy of hunting gathering still continues during the Iron Age. This hunting gathering aspect is very relevant, especially in the sites like in tropical forests, because we cannot rule out that the gathering or no the collection of wild faunal remains or faunal materials could have been quite resourceful in the tropical conditions wherever this megalithic site that we are discussing henceforth. Some evidences to horse domestication. Horse domestication is also represented both in the form of the skeleton as well as in the indirectly represented through the horse ornaments, and most of this are reported from the Vidarbha megaliths, but some of the sites in Andhra Pradesh also shows the indication of horse ornaments and horse domestication. So therefore, in southern Indian megaliths, the horse domestication might have also been introduced during this time. Coming very specifically to the Karnataka, because it's a very wide subject, it will not be possible to focus on all the sites or many of the sites that we can focus even in Karnataka or beyond Karnataka. But let me emphasize that some of the important works that were conducted in the regions of Karnataka is the earliest work is represented through the works of Meadows Taylor. Meadows Taylor, going back to 1841, his text on the megalithic tombs and other ancient remains in Deccan, probably the very first or earliest publication that told us about certain burial practices or mortuary practices. And probably, if I'm not wrong, the credit of stratigraphy or representing a stratigraphical way of archaeological information is probably also goes back to the works of Meadows Taylor. In the southern part of Karnataka, Meadows Taylor was more into the northern part of Karnataka, and earliest megalithic sites are also reported from northern Karnataka. In southern Karnataka, the works of Leonardo, central and southern part of Karnataka, the works of Leonardo Mun in 1934, his prehistoric and protohistoric finds very systematically reports the Hirebenkal megaliths and some of the megaliths in the regions of Raichur Doab as well. M.H. Krishna, who was a director of state archaeology of Mysore State, he was the earliest to represent the Iron Age as an habitational remains through the stratigraphical evidences in Brahmagiri, and later on, Sir Mortimer Wheeler excavated many of the megalithic sites in the same site, along with Brahmagiri and Chandravali. However, the Sir Mortimer Wheeler's excavation became a breakthrough in Indian archaeology, uh, probably because it was much more scientific or quite of methodological, as well as the Brahmagiri report, which came in Ancient India series, became reachable widely for the Indian readers and the beyond. I mean, so therefore Brahmagiri became quite popular. Then later excavations like excavations in Muskie by B.K. Thapar followed the footprints of Mortimer Wheeler, because the Neolithic and Iron Age and early historic stratigraphical representation and represented by the excavations in Brahmagiri. And Sir Mortimer Wheeler is probably one of the first to link the Iron Age habitation remains with the megalithic burials that were there in the site vicinities. So that also brought an influence or an impact to go for an excavation in Muskie, and similar kind of occupational remains right from Neolithic, Iron Age, and early history is represented in Muskie, and some of the burials in Muskie megaliths were also excavated by B.K. Thapar in 1957. Later on, the works of A. Sundara, I'm talking about Karnataka. Otherwise, in extreme southern part of Karnataka, the Tamil Nadu is also very well represented in the megalithic typologies. In Karnataka, 1975, a comprehensive report by A. Sundara brought in lot of megalithic sites in Karnataka coming on records, and he very systematically categorized various regional developments in burial typology within the Karnataka. His perspective was very much clear that there are different regions within Karnataka which is represented or which shows a different megalithic types, and probably this is the very earliest link that we get to understand the possibility of megalithic type diversities associated with the landscape or associated with the regional geography. Later on, the works of U.S. Murthy also continued on the similar lines, and we started to get more clarity about the landscape association with the megalithic typologies within Karnataka. The works of Guru Raja Rao in 1972 also brought in various inputs for that. So therefore, we have a very quite comprehensive literature to talk about the megaliths of the Karnataka region. However, the earliest reports by Meadows Taylor going back to 1840s and 1850s is through the works like ancient remains at the village of Jevargi. So as I emphasized, probably the Meadows Taylor's work is one of the earliest works that started to give us or helped us to picturize about these mortuary practices. And there is a place called Jevargi in Gulbarga district in northern Karnataka. And I think that is the most oldest region that represented the megalithic studies. And it was quite potential because not that the other regions also don't have similar kind of megaliths. However, the megaliths in Jevargi, the megaliths were associated with ash mounds or the ash mound deposits, which later on K. Padaya emphasized that the continuity of ash mound tradition or the Neolithic with the megalithic communities. However, the region of Jevargi started to become more representative in the form of megaliths of dolmens and identification of number of stone circles, not with single circle, rather multiple layered stone circles were reported by Meadows Taylor, and he started to give a very picturesque landscape. I mean, the site landscape and the megaliths is something that becomes quite interesting to understand the landscape of 19th century and the today's ever-changing landscapes that we can come. Yeah, so he conducted excavations, he opened many of the burials, and he started to give both a vertical as well as cross-section of the burials in a more representing more in a form of stratigraphically to distinguish between what is a mound, what is a cairn burial, how the erection of the burials were taken place. And this is one of the cairn burial, and the lowermost section, you can see that there is a cyst chambers and associated with some skeletal remains. So this also becomes very important that to understand the diversities, because it is a typical megalith, but it is not purely a secondary burial. Coming to the cultural materials, large number of cultural materials were represented. And that is also the time when we started to understand that there are iron objects, there are associated ceramics, though not much emphasis was given on understanding the ceramics, but to a certain extent, we were able to understand there were grave goods associated with the megaliths. As per the listing, there are different categories of cultural materials related to the Iron Age, like ceramics, weapons, the field implements, domestic implements, bridal equipments, bells and jingles, ornaments and cosmetic accessories, maybe in the other regions of the megaliths. So it becomes highly clear. Coming to the excavated sites in Karnataka, though there are large number of sites, but the excavation of megalithic sites is quite limited. Sites such as Jevargi, going back to 1840s, then Brahmagiri, Maski, Tekkalakota, Piklihal, Sangankallu and Kubgal, Kudutini. Then these are represented in northern Karnataka and central Karnataka, which is very semi-arid conditions. Coming to the savanna or tropical regions of Karnataka, sites like Savandurga, Cherigenahalli, Hemige, T. Narsipura, Banavalli, Manuvandanahalli. So it goes on. In the study area that I am focusing on, the earliest sites were reported in Virajpet, Koppal, which Koppal was also Koppa, which was also called as Fraserpet in the colonial period, which is now called as also Kushal Nagar, Heggadehalli, Dodamolemate, Sulemate. So there are limited number of sites that has been excavated. So therefore, the dates are also quite limited out of that excavated. Going with the occurrence of iron objects in Karnataka, it is going back to 1620 to 1400 BC, that is the 15th to 17th millennium BC. To the earliest, like 3000 years ago. The dates from Karavakele is dated between 820 to 400 BCE. Brahmagiri is not, one of these ceramics that were collected from the burial. It is going back to 2140 to 1940 BC. Maski is giving a date. Maski has given a radiocarbon date of AMS C14 date of 19th century BC. Wadgal has a date of about 1510 BC. So likewise, we have quite interesting dates, which is going beyond 1200 and which is getting closer to the closure of the first millennium BC. Now, coming to the very specific understanding of the study area. So let me emphasize the Coorg region, or which is also called as the Coorg district, going in terms of administrative boundaries. Let us focus on the Coorg district, which is part of the Western Ghats, not just part of the Western Ghats. The Coorg Plateau, what it is geologically represented, it is quite high rainfall plateau with quite evergreen tropical forest covers, fallow landscapes, grasslands, and high valleys and low elevated valleys, which has also given birth or the emergence of the mighty river like Kaveri. So the river Kaveri, the upper reaches of Kaveri is mostly represented by the study area that we are discussing now. Yeah, so as I told you, this is the forest cover. The Coorg Plateau is covered with high valleys and high hills, which is almost touching to around 1500 to 1600 meters. The rainfall is quite high, outnumbering about 2500 to 3000 millimeters per year. And there were also quite fluctuations in the rainfall conditions as well, as recorded by the geomorphological studies on the river Kaveri. So we are talking about the tropical evergreen forests, and here is a megalithic population or a megalithic community which is entering into this forest and establishing their settlements, establishing their social networking, developing their resources, and so on. So in the study area, we can broadly classify two types of ecological zones, which is popularly called as, one is the Malenadu. Malenadu represents the mountain forests and the evergreen deciduous forest. The Kanivenadu represents a kind of a very low elevated hill ranges or number of passes So when it comes to the Kanive Nadu, the kind of forest cover is basically bamboo shrubs, some blackwood, agony, teak, sandalwood, these kind of forest covers, whereas the Malenadu represents the high deciduous tropical evergreen forest. So we have two kinds of landscapes, and therefore it also shows that the megalithic sites that are there in the study area also represent some kind of partial affiliation with the kind of these hills as well. Much of the sites that we will discuss henceforth is in the Kanive Nadu, and the sites in Malenadu is also a kind of a regional perspective to be understood. So by and large, the landscape is though tropical evergreen forest, but there are the grassy glades or the fallow landscapes like this, as you see. The climate is quite harsh. In summer, it is moderate hot. However, the monsoon is quite full with high precipitation. The winter is foggy, and therefore we have to try to understand that the megalithic communities who are there in this forest are going through these extreme climatic conditions, and especially the monsoon and winter, the settlements might have become very tough, and on the other hand, there is no scarcity of water. Now, water also plays a crucial role, because when we talk about Iron Age culture or megalithic culture in South India, or in the regional in the broader regional perspectives, we talk about the accessibility of water for the megalithic communities or establishment of Iron Age sites, because that also led to developing certain kind of water reservoirs or water embankments or no water collection strategies. However, here it is plenty of water because it is high rainfall. Then the strategy of resource management is also quite different. There are various legends associated with the Coorg region or Coorg Plateau. There are legends that are associated, related to the stories of Ramayana. However, one of the legends that very interestingly tells us that this is the region which is having a large number of rivulets or streams. It also shows in hydrological map as well. So there are two mighty rivers, two large rivers, Kaveri, and one of its tributary is the Harangi. So the upper reaches of Kaveri looks in this way, surrounded by the lush green trees on the river banks, and the water it is a non-perennial river, so therefore the water fluctuates in its density. So large number of rivulets. The whole Coorg Plateau is studded with small rivulets, larger rivulets, and number of streams. And probably you might have heard that there is also a recurrent floods in the upper reaches of this Kaveri, because whenever there is a high precipitation, number of streams become active and it flows toward the rivers, and the river becomes quite interesting. Coming to the ecology, understanding the ecological conditions, one of the earliest works like the Forest Tribes of Mysore and Coorg by John Cameron, he gives a very vivid picture of number of plantations or the trees cultivation that were there, including the agony, the blackwood, the bamboo shrubs, the teak. And when it comes to cultivation, the cultivation was mostly paddy and ragi. Probably now the cultivation of finger millet is diminished, more dependent on paddy cultivation or wet cultivation. Apart from that, the plantation, among the plantation, the coffee plantation, and much more commercial recently developed plantation is cultivating or growing the birch kind of timbers. Coming to the caste, the Coorg tribes and caste that were written by Krishna Iyer in 1948, he mentions about quite interesting communities that can be linked with the funeral practices. There are Aboriginal tribes who are basically non-Coorgis, such as the Erawa, Kuruba. Among the Kuruba, there are two communities, two classifications. One is Jenu Kuruba and Betta Kuruba. Jenu means the honey. They gather honey. The Betta Kuruba means they are dwellers on the hills. and you have another tribe called Malakodia. So they have their own subsistence pattern, they have their own occupational pattern, but when it comes to funeral practices, the Erawa bury their dead along with the rice and milk poured into the pit. The rice is very crucial because in the megaliths, lot of paddy. In the case of Kuruba, they buried, they cremated in case of children and deceases were burned. Only the child or infants are buried, otherwise the adults, sub-adults are all cremated. When it comes to Kuruba, the Betta Kuruba, they buried corpus placed sideways, heading towards the west. When it comes to Malakudia, the elders are only cremated and the younger are buried, and therefore their relatives bring 5 seers of rice. I mean, the relatives who come to attend the funeral, they have to come with the rice or the paddy. So the paddy is very common factor which can link to the paddy in the megaliths. To be very specific to the Coorg Plateau, the earliest works were by Colonel Mackenzie, Robert R.A. Cole, Captain R.A. Cole, which is going back to 1860s and 1860s to 1880s. These 20 years, there were a lot of excavations by the colonial officers who were around the areas called the Viraj Pet or Fraser Pet in the Coorg Plateau or Coorg districts. So many of the excavations were conducted, or if you don't call that excavation, they were opening the burials, they are opening the megaliths, and they are represented by wide number of earliest information. So earliest records comes from the works, from the Archives of Asiatic Society of Bengal, which was published by Robert R.A. Cole, Captain R.A. Cole. So he reports number of dolmens, the dolmens which were the dolmens as well as the stone circles which were full of ceramics, and they were cyst burials, and therefore the earliest perspective that R.A. Cole developed over these burials are, since they are large dolmens and heavier slabs, he associated this megalithic practices to the wooders. The wooders are nothing but the professionally, they were associated with the quarrying the rocks or breaking the rocks. No, there were road works that were going on. In that process, they started to find megaliths, and Cole associated these huge stones that were crafted probably by the wooders. The earliest dates that R.A. Cole gave is probably these burials are around 200 to 300 years old. But however, today's understanding of megaliths is quite millennium. So large number of artifacts like various kind of ceramics, carnelian beads, ceramics full of paddy, and the later works that were extensively conducted by K.K. Subbaiah. He started with his thesis, PhD thesis, and later it was also published as Archaeology of Coorg. So he excavated number of sites, especially a site called Heggedehalli and Koppa, and there the more details about the cultural materials started to appear. So the cultural materials which are represented in these forms are quite important because they become a very standardized and common kind of cultural materials that are found in various megalithic sites or megalithic burials, such as vessels, red slipwood ware vessels of different dimension and different globular size, pans, then black slipwares, smaller varieties, as well as the bowl types, then three-legged jars in this case. And these three-legged jars usually carry either the cremated or the ash, the skeletal remains, which is very well burned, or the ash, or the deposition of paddy or ragi. Then coming to the iron implements, it seems that all these excavations that were conducted in the study area quite long ago, they were given very rich iron age or iron implements, such as the flat axes, the daggers, javelin heads, arrowheads, knives. So quite important kind of implements that were commonly found. So the excavations of Heggedehalli brought in various evidences for carnelian beads. So the Coorg Plateau, all these excavations, right from the excavations of 1840s and 1850s and 1860s to 1970s and 1980s, one of the common grave goods are these kind of grave goods: the iron implements, ceramics, and also the crops of paddy and ragi. Along with that, the carnelian beads. There are no other beads represented in this region except the carnelian beads. And in technical terms, or in a very lay terms, what we call as the etched carnelian beads. That means the white painted or white impressed pigments over the red carnelian beads. So they were very high potential sites, which shows the association of large number of carnelian beads found in these burials, apart from the regular kind of grave goods. So these are stone circles. The stone circles with cyst or with pit burials. Either in the case, they are all secondary burials that were excavated in the study area. So now let me come to very specific within the Coorg Plateau research project that we conducted about 5 years ago. From 2016 to 2019 and 20, a particular, much more focused archaeological explorations were conducted under the banners of COPA Archaeological Research Project. So before conducting this site-centered or regional-centered systematic explorations, some of the preliminary studies were conducted during 2014 to 2016, focusing on a site called Copa, which was excavated earlier by Captain Cole in 1860s, as well as later by the Mysore State Archaeology Department and K.K. Subbaiah and Mysore University collaborative works that were conducted in the site of Copa. So the fresh explorations were conducted in this site and identified number of burials such as the stone circles, the pit burials, cyst burials, and so on. So it was in this site that I tried to understand that there is a particular nature of habitation deposition, and this habitation is associated with cluster of burials. You have different cluster of megalithic sites or cluster of megalithic burials, but all the megalithic burials will not be having a common common location of habitation sites. Rather, they are shared locations or shared habitation sites, big habitation sites with multiple megalithic sites. It was also understood here that the association of megalithic sites on the river channel is very scarce. Rather, they avoided being very closer to the Kaveri river. Rather, they kept aloof, or they got associated with the low elevated hilly terrains, and where there are ephemeral streams that become active during the precipitation or during the monsoon. So number of landscape approaches were developed before getting into the proper regional surveys. So in this way, the site of Copa was understood in terms of landscape archaeology, and associating the habitation sites. So hence, later on, the region was expanded to 121 square kilometer of area. Very focused area was demarcated. The study area, or 121 square kilometer area, consisting of the river, the streams, as well as the high hilly landscapes, low elevated landscapes. So it was collectively a representation, a very proper representation of the regional landscape. And there, the number of sites were identified through that transact service. We went with a particular goal, such as exploring new sites and identifying the sites in the background of land use pattern, landscape studies, and try to understand the distribution of cultural materials with georeferencing various aspects such as the rock shelter frequencies, the modern hamlets, the current state of preservation of the sites, then connecting that with the provenance and catchment analysis, especially based on the water bodies, as well as the geological or rock formations, trying to understand the present domestication of flora and fauna. So various aspects were considered to develop the socio-theoretical models. So 121 square kilometer of area was marked, and there we conducted a transact survey with a regular interval of 500 meters and 1000 meters interval. This exploration was completely a non-sampling survey. At this stage, we didn't sample any organic material or the cultural material. Rather, the focus was more on documenting and understanding the site distribution within the landscape of 121 square kilometer of area. So in this survey, we identified and studied 39 megalithic sites And these megalithic sites were having, out of 38, 26 were megalithic sites. Out of 38, 12 were habitation sites. So the habitation sites become entirely a fresh discoveries or freshly reported sites. And this study area also consisted of a few megalithic sites that were excavated during the colonial period. So this is the distribution of the megalithic sites that we studied within the study area of 1 to 1 square kilometer of area. Large number of sites were identified, which crucially indicates that they are clustered as well as they are quite away from the channels, the broader channels as well. So therefore, when it comes to megalithic types in the study area, menhirs, different types of menhirs or different scales of menhirs, cairn burials, dolmens, passage dolmens or passage tombs, stone circles with schist burials, some kind of possible zoomorphic or some kind of anthropomorphic, zoomorphic kind of attempts, possibly. Then dolmens with very regularly, prominently projected portholes, dolmens with certain kind of menhirs associated with it. And these burials are not strictly within the study area. These dolmens, this site is from Doddomale and Sulemate, which is in the very high elevated area of the northern part of the Coorg Plateau. It was used for comparative studies. But apart from that, the study area is quite dominant and represented through the stone circles with schist burials like you see here. So they are closely associated with the landscapes because the landscapes or the low elevated hills are full of boulders, and within the boulder, the use of boulders and the bedrocks become quite crucial. The habitation sites were usually located closer to these kind of low elevated hills, which was called as, which I told you as Kanive Nadu or Kanives, the passes that are there. So habitation sites are associated with this kind of landscape, and the megaliths are usually on top of a low elevated hills or distributed over the slopes of the low elevated hills. Many occupational evidences were represented in the form of ceramics, microliths, a partial representation of stone ring stones, possibly going to the different cultural periods. And the habitation sites were also associated and found with the rock shelters. This is one of a rock shelter, which is called as Jainkal Betta, which is quite elevated from the surrounding landscapes. And on these, in the bottom or in the foot of these escarpments, the deposition of ceramics as well as the ash or burnt activities are also indicated in these kind of escarpments. And the habitations are focused in the low elevated areas. There are sites that were also found in the confluence regions where there are two rivers. For example, the right side is the river Kaveri, the left side is the river Arengi, and in the fringe of this confluence, there are megalithic sites. So the sites started to be understood, both megalithic sites and habitation sites were started to be understood with the site formation process. One of the crucial questions that comes to the picture when we start studying megalithic sites is that what is the nature of the habitation sites? And especially in the tropical forests or in the Western Ghats landscape, what is the availability or how much do we know about habitation sites? Because when it comes to central part of Karnataka, northern part of Karnataka, per se, for example, the sites like Maski or Brahmagiri, we know that the habitation sites are very well represented in the multi-period stratigraphy associated with Neolithic and Iron Age. But when it comes to the Western Ghats, the site formation process seems to be very challenging. Why? Because the high deposition of sediments, the colloidal activities, and due to the high rainfall, the growth cycle of the scrubs are very high, and the degradation or decomposition of the bedrock is also quite higher in rate. So therefore, there is quite challenging to identify habitation sites, and therefore many of the habitation sites that were found is represented by very less number of or less density of cultural materials. So therefore, one of the sites was selected for trial trenching, and there this is an habitation site. So the trial trenching was conducted, and here when it comes to the depositional rate, the artifacts, the stray artifacts or the microliths that are there on the surface was completely absent in the subsurface. Why? Because the nature of site formation process is quite interesting and challenging to understand here. Because the high sedimentation rate or high depositional rate, it's not erosional, it's not about the erosional landscape, rather it's an aggradational landscapes. The high deposition of aggradation, frequent wet conditions make the sediments clayey as well as more deposited because of grasslands and the forest regeneration process that takes place. And the bottom layer is more represented with the quartz veins or quartz grains, which indicates that the granites that were there, the granite has decomposed into the soil, whereas the quartz has sustained in its character in the form of grains, which was originally quartz vein. So therefore, all this indicate that the deposition, the landscape is more robust, and therefore it becomes very challenging to focus on habitation sites. And however, it is quite interesting to understand the landscape formation or the kind of developing a paleoclimatic and geomorphological models to understand what was the inverse conditions during the first millennium and second millennium BCE, where the Iron Age population has witnessed. There are references to some of the geomorphological studies when it comes to understanding what kind of paleoclimatic conditions the study area or the survey area has undergone. When it comes to the arid regions like the Godavari Basin or in the northern part of Karnataka, which is semi-arid conditions, there the Holocene dimensions clearly indicate that the region, the first millennium and second millennium BC, there was a series or continuous increase in aridification of climatic condition. However, the Western Ghats, in this part of the Western Ghats, the story is different. There were recurrent flash floods and paleo floods that are recorded on the river bank of Kaveri within the study area, representing the paleoclimatic conditions of the Western Ghats or the Coorg Plateau during the second millennium and first millennium BC. The geomorphological studies over the Kaveri, the river sections of Kaveri, indicates that there is a recurrent flash floods occurring, especially during the 2000 to 8000 years ago. That means during the first and second millennium BC, if this was the date that we are trying to understand, the megalithic population have witnessed very high precipitation and quite of recurrent flash floods over the river banks. Probably that is also one of the reasons where the megalithic sites are not close to the bank, especially the no habitation sites are close to the bank. Though some of the megalithic sites are found in the confluence region, the confluence region or the confluence location also floods very high because of the two rivers contributing to the flood. However, the second millennium and first millennium BC, the paleoclimatic condition is more represented with a high precipitation, and therefore the flash floods were recurrently common. And probably the megalithic communities have avoided going closer to the river, rather limiting themselves or for sticking themselves to the low elevated valleys where the streams might have contributed to their subsistence economy. Coming to the resources, large number of sites, large number of iron production, iron workshops, iron workshop or iron smelting area in the form of slabs were also identified in the study area. So where is this iron? The iron is something which is regional as well. To the northern part of the study area, the Kudremukh and Kalasa region of the Western Ghats have high deposition of iron. Well, in the southern part, that is towards the borders of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, towards the Nilgiri hills, there are high deposition of the iron as well. Probably the iron is something that was very closely linked with the concentration of megalithic sites in this part of the region. Secondly, not only the iron or the water, the dependence, they are entering into the evergreen forest, and there is high possibility that the megalithic communities networked and sourced the forest resources, gathering forest resources and sourcing them to distribute among the various megalithic sites within the region or beyond. Why beyond? Because they are very they are located, the study area is located close to the west coast. So probably the many regional pockets, even in the regions of Nilgiri, even in the regions of even in the pockets of the Coorg Plateau uh, or Wayanad region, there are number of small scale or regionally developed megalithic sites. So therefore, the iron and the forest resources must have uh, developed a strategy and ability for the Iron Age communities to enter into the tropical forest, and they were quite successful in establishing their settlements, establishing high density of megaliths, sourcing iron, establishing probably their regional economy in these forms as well. Well, some of the megaliths also being enshrined today, and what is the current condition when you look at the ethnographic parallels, as I have also mentioned, the aboriginal tribes such as the Erawas and Kurumbas, they still erect dolmens, and the local villagers, they strongly believe that the dolmens, converting the dolmens into the modern shrines, though they are megalithic dolmens or the Iron Age dolmens, the dolmens were converted into the shrines, placing the idols. In this case, this is a dolmen shrine. Uh, the people have placed a Shivalinga, and you can see a Rangoli, which is currently, I mean, which is actively worshipped and believed that to be a shrine. The another version is the stone cyst circle burials are frequently destroyed because they anticipate some kind of treasure that is hidden in the cyst burials. This is also a common factor. So these are the megaliths. These are the dolmens that are very quite modern. I mean, even today, the Kurumbas, they still practice, or Kurumbas, or even some of the ethnic communities probably also continue these megalithic practices. In this case, you can see the small two dolmens, one of the dolmen with multiple capstone, one side open, because the opening will allow them to convert them, these dolmens, into the shrines. So here is another shrine, which is quite modern, but they are following the typology of dolmens, megalithic dolmens. This is another shrine with multiple uprights as well as multiple capstones. So these are presently enshrined. The use of lamps, the use of some kind of structural rocks. These rocks, these pebbles looks like a, probably they indicate some kind of symbolic way of approaches to the local people. So probably that makes them to pick them up and enshrine them as a idols. The practice is quite going on. So these are various aspects that we still have to understand. There are a lot of things that we still are in the verge of understanding the megaliths of South India or megaliths of Karnataka or the study area itself. One of the key understanding that we have to get closer is the understanding the settlements, understanding the habitation, site formation process. Then we need to try to understand how the mortuary practices or some of the resources like iron as well as foraging, forest products must have developed their local or regional economical perspectives that keep them very intact. The large number of megalithic sites also tells us a story that they were very much intact even during the first millennium BC, and probably the megalithic communities were the earliest communities to enter into the Western Ghats or to adopt themselves into the tropical condition of the Western Ghats. Because we don't find any other cultural remains in the study area. There is no Neolithic remains or the Paleolithic remains or even the early historic remains. So therefore, the study area that we focused here, that under the banner of COPA Archaeological Research Project, I call it as these are exclusively an Iron Age landscapes. It was that point of time where the social as well as the economic potentiality is maximized, and they were able to adapt to the tropical environs. So I will stop here. Maybe I have exceeded about 10 minutes. Sorry for that. Thank you. Thank you for the organizers who have invited me, and thank you for all the attendees who has patiently listened to my talk.
Yeah, thank you, Arjun. Thank you for this interesting talk and lots of data that you presented here. Now we'll take questions from the audience. Can you see the chat box, Arjun? You can see the questions in the chat box?
Yes, Anil.
Okay, you can go through the questions and answer the questions.
I think the first one is by Prakash Sinha. No, I am Pratima Sachan. Sorry. Research scholar, University of Allahabad. Sir, I have two small queries. What attributes of iron tools reflect socio-cultural aspects? How much light your controlled survey suggested about social and economic structure in the region? To answer to the first question, I mean, all kind of tools or every kind of tools are associated with the socio-cultural aspects. You take it a stone tool or with the metal tools, it has its no, it comes from it comes with a background of social as well as cultural uh, approaches. Or any new technology or any new tool also has potentiality to bring a difference or changes in the social cultural practices. Similarly, the iron, when it comes to the iron technology or iron tools, I think that see, we have to see in the two different way. So that is also quite regional. If we connect that with the very happening political region like Indo-Gangetic plains or the Gangetic Ganga Yamuna plains, there the warfare implements like daggers, knife, swords. So they are defense, more associated with the defensive objects or offensive approaches. So that gives an perspective the use of such kind of iron implements in the kind of battle or conflict or warfare, establishing a political strategized. In the same way, see, there are some theories where iron plowshares or iron tools brought a boost. It made a robust agricultural practices. The Indo-Gangetic plains were plains, so therefore, no, the iron plowshares, iron implements, they brought a very kind of fast impact on the society. This is one approach, but both this theory cannot fit into South India. Because when we talk about the social background or the use of these kind of implements in agriculture, this is largely a Deccan Plateau. It's a terrain. So the use of iron implements, we don't know, iron plowshares, these kind of things, we don't know how much it was impactful in enhancing the agricultural production, contributing to the economy and bringing a social change. On the other hand, it is not very culturally viable to associate this to the defensive and offensive mode. However, within the study area, what I have observed, answering to your second question now, I will let me connect to that. So, number of megalithic sites, which large representation or production of iron implements, which clearly indicates that there was some kind of clustered defensive approaches. That means within the small study area, within this region, the sites were politically connected, or the definition of politics is vague in understanding the later early historic developments. However, let us say like a chiefdom, like guarding or protecting their communities, protecting their settlements. So there is a possibility that the iron tools, which are majorly represented in the form of javelins, spearheads, arrowheads, this clearly indicates that there were certain defensive mechanism that they have developed, and it was it was quite strategic to protect their communities. Protecting from what? What is the resource? I think that the resource is there again, two important resources. One is what the communities have gathered from the forest, the wild flora or the wild forest products that were gathered. Second one is the paddy. So probably those were the very important resources that they were supposed they must have defended for. So yeah, there is this kind of socio-economical structure that we can understand from the study area. So the second one is by Gaurangi Sharma. insightful lecture. My questions are, do the practices discussed of the Aboriginals still continues? There was still shown, I think there is some. The second question is, there was a picture shown of a pond-like structure with a rock art depiction of human legs. What was that? Coming to the Aboriginal, yeah, there are tribal communities who practice a similar kind of megalithism, but not erecting the megaliths. When it comes to mortuary practices, as I told you, the relevance or the significance to paddy in the mortuary practices, that commonality, that similarity is there even in the Yarrawa and Kurumba rites. Answering to your second question, I think I should go back to the slides. I exactly don't remember. There was a picture shown of a pond. Anil, should I share the screen?
Yes, yeah.
Because I'm not sure whether I have to search now again.
I mean, you can skip that also, probably. Maybe you can go to the next question.
Maybe we'll take it later if there is time. So going to the next question is by Jadhav Vijay Kumar. What are the scientific dating methods applied for Karnataka state in the recent excavations in the megalithic sites? Basically, AMS C14 dating method. Why AMS C14 dating method? Because the carbon remains or the charcoal remains from the megaliths, from the megalithic burials, they are dated. Now there is also possibility of going for TL dating on pottery. Yeah, from Karnataka, these are the methods, scientific methods that is found. Next question is by Abdul Faisal. I saw a slide showing a type of burial with melee skeletons. My question is, did the megalithic people bury many bodies in a single burial, or did they usually bury only one body? If they buried many bodies in one burial, what was their objective? Yeah, the slide, the slide or the drawing that you saw is by Meadows Taylor. That is in the bottom, it is a megalith. On the megalith, over the period of time, there were very later depositions. So that it is not, it doesn't, the whole section doesn't purely represent the megalithic period. They belong to different time period. As I told you, most of the megalithic burials are secondary burials. They are not primary burials. I think, see, that is also one of the challenge where to understand the conducting an osteological studies or paleontological studies or genetic studies, megaliths are very tough because they are mostly secondary burials, not primary. By Jenny Peter, she says, how did the shift to rice and iron impact population and quality? Second one is, can you comment briefly on continuity from Neolithic, Chalcolithic to Iron Age? Yeah, answering to your first question, the impact is, you see, the paddy cultivation must have become prosperous. Why? Because of the wet landscape. Second one is high precipitation. Then the knowledge of agriculture has also improvised because early Neolithic is the beginning of agriculture. So over the period of time, over 2000 years, the knowledge of cultivation, the knowledge of plant cultivation has improvised in the southern India. So with that, the introduction of winter crops or wet crops is also developed. So out of that, the rice or the paddy is mostly cultivated. And one of the reasons why I made this comment is, one is all the burials that are excavated have evidence to paddy. Second one is, even today, in the 18th and 19th century, there is colonial reports that clearly indicates the region was very prosperous in cultivating ragi and rice. You see, it's a tropical region. You have wet crop as well as a dry crop, a summer crop as well as a monsoonal crop. I made that comment because even today, even in this year, paddy is the most cultivated crop there, apart from plantations. So therefore, the region has its impact in paddy cultivation or rice cultivation. How it impact on the population? Because access to more paddy cultivation also indicated by associating them into burial practices. It becomes ritualistic as well, not only dietary or consumption purposes, but also it becomes part of the mortuary practices. So coming to the iron implements or iron objects are mostly kind of defensive or offensive kind of useful for that kind of purpose, like arrowheads, javelin, swords, axes, axe. No, the axe can be attributed not only for cutting the forest, it can also be attributed for defensive purpose also. So therefore, they have resources. So beyond this, I think the rice, the paddy, the iron, and one more important resource is the wild forest products, which we still don't know what it is because it is not directly represented from the burials. But the ecology, considering the ecology, it is a very rich ecology for forest products, such as pepper, the wild pepper, wild, wild spices, fruits, nuts, or roots, tubers. So these resources were very economic, impactful for developing a polity. Second one is, can you comment briefly on the continuity of Neolithic, Chalcolithic to Iron Age? In this region, in the Coorg Plateau or in the study area, no Neolithic continuity, or neither there is Iron Age to early historic continuity. It is exclusively Iron Age. But let me comment in a very general sense, considering the northern Karnataka, northern Andhra Pradesh, Telangana region, more than continuity, there is a kind of upgradation in the tool technology and continuity of agro-pastoral communities, because some late Neolithic people had made some attempts towards megalithic, being a megalithic in character. So there is a continuity, but it is not very sure whether the population is same, whether the Neolithic population and Iron Age populations are of same. That is very problematic to understand. The next question by Gopal Mahitosh. He wants to know how megalithic culture contribute to hero stone culture. There is a megalith. What are megaliths? Megaliths are commemorative. No, what are hero stones? Hero stones also commemorative. Since the Iron Age or since the megalithic period, even till today, even in the early historic time, medieval period, till today, burials are associated with the commemoration. They are memorials. For example, Taj Mahal is also a memorial. That is also a huge white megalith. In that sense, if you take, hero stone is continuation of this approach. Only difference is, in the case of megalith, they are burials, secondary burials. But in the case of hero stones, they are not burials, but the story of commemoration of a specific person is narrated or communicated through carvings or sculpture, or sometimes hero stones are also found with carvings as well as inscriptions. The next question is by...
Okay, Arjun, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering all the questions. I think we're going beyond
time
limit. Maybe you can take one question, which is in the Q&A box by Shikha Rai. If you can access it, you want me to read out?
Q&A. Can you please read out?
Yeah. So basically, she has 2 questions, but 3 were written. One is that how safe is to use megaliths and the Iron Age interchangeably for a cultural period? This is the first question.
Okay. Why we interchange is that because of the popular notion, that's it. Because right from the beginning stage, and we have continued to use this term Iron Age and megaliths interchangeably, and they themselves have become a very strong indicators to understand that particular cultural phase. So that's why we use alternatively Iron Age and megaliths. However, the megaliths that we are talking, are belonging to Iron Age phase. Why Iron Age phase? Because the megaliths represents the early use of iron. Yeah, second one, Anil.
Okay. Second is that what is your opinion on etched cornelian beads?
Oh,
Have you come across any reference to the workshop?
no workshop sets.
Okay.
They are
Third
all
one is, yeah.
completely made carnelian beads.
Okay. Okay. The third one is the last one. What about the chronological issues? Do we have a robust data to understand the changes or adaptations of new types of megaliths?
Unfortunately, no. We have large number of sites. Megalithic sites are one of the favorite or highly studied um, data in Indian archaeology. But when it comes to some of the questions like dates, chronology, very perspective, some of the perspectives, no, we have been poorly understood that.
Okay, okay, Arjun, that is what. Thank you very much for answering all these questions and also for the interesting talk. Great amounts of data that you have presented. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that
Thank
is
you,
it.
Anil,
Yeah,
Sharada, and Professor Prabhakar for giving me this invitation. And thanks to all the attendees who asked good questions and enriched the discussion. Thank you.
yeah. We will also thank all the participants. We'll meet in the next talk, that is the 63rd talk on the webinar series the next month, the last Saturday of the next month. Until then, bye-bye. You have a nice weekend. Thank you.